on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:06 on O'Connor and Company this Thursday morning. Thanks for joining us on the 21st day of September. Coming up at 6:35, Cameron Hamilton, who's running for Congress in the Virginia 7th District. 7:05, the governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. 7:35, Mike Gonzalez of Heritage Foundation. And at 8:05, Congressman Chip Roy on the Merrick Garland hearing yesterday. And whatever else is on our mind. I'm Larry O'Connor, and that's Mercedes Schlepp. Good morning, Mercedes.
Hi, Larry. Good morning.
In 1927, Charles Lindbergh made his solo flight across the Atlantic. Calvin Coolidge, President of the United States, announced that he would approve funding for a new sculpture that would be carved in South Dakota at Mount Rushmore. Mm-hmm. And the Jazz Singer, the first talking picture starring Al Jolson, premiered. And also in 1927, Pauline Newman was born. Oh. And Pauline Newman, who is 96 years old, is a sitting judge on the U.S. Not with the U.S. Court of... let's find out where she is right now. With Mark Chenoweth, President and General Counsel of New Civil Liberties Alliance. I thought she was sitting on the U.S. Court of Appeals, but no, we've got an order from the Court of Appeals that you've been able to work with here. Go ahead and tell me where this story stands, Counselor.
Sure. So thanks for having me, Larry and Mercy. Good to be with you this morning. Judge Pauline Newman is an active judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, okay. But her colleagues have used what we think to be unlawful processes to try to remove her from that court. And as you know, Larry, the only way you can remove a federal judge from the bench is through impeachment. Mm-hmm. But they're not using impeachment. They instead have tried to order her to take a mental fitness exam and have ordered yesterday that she be removed from the bench because she hasn't taken the specific exam they want her to take.
I mean, you know where this interview is going to head.
We both.
we know where we're going with this.
We looked at each other on this.
Let's get to the and I got to tell you, God bless her. She's been serving 39 years on the Court of Appeals. But honestly, God, I want to get into the legality and the constitutionality of it and all that jazz and also the other ramifications. But my gut is she's 96 years old. She should enjoy life. Why does she want to continue to work? I know there's a principle involved here, but it also sends the message. No, I think
you should be
people
a talk
should spend
show
time.
Radio host till you're 96 years old. I mean, we're going to need Mark to
That's
defend
not a lot of heavy
legally
lifting, though. I want Mrs. Newman to spend time with her kids and her grandkids and her great-grandkids.
That is not. You don't decide that. You don't decide that.
Well,
if the 96-year-old wants to be part of the U.S. Court of Appeals, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just got to say, Judge Newman doesn't have kids or grandkids. Her whole life has been spent in the law. She received a Ph.D. in chemistry from Yale University in 1952. I mean, she is a living legend, and she is an amazing woman who's had just an amazing history. Really a kind of a Ruth Bader Ginsburg figure, although she is a Ronald Reagan.
It could be information to change your life forever. Or the Something You Should Know podcast could just be something interesting.
My guest is Kim Zachman. She is author of the book, There's No Cream in Cream Soda. I don't think I've ever really known the story of why they're called hot dogs.
There is so many legends about the name of the hot dog. When the immigrants came over and they brought all of their sausages, they also brought their dachshunds. It really is because they kind of look like dachshunds.
Something you should know wherever you listen.
Appointee. And she is still mentally sharp. I was a little skeptical when we first heard about this case. One of our lawyers had clerked for her and brought this opportunity to us to represent her. And I said, 90 at the time she was 95. Really, she's still mentally fit? I was a little skeptical. Yeah. We met with her. I am not. This is not a Dianne Feinstein or Joe Biden situation. She is completely in charge of her mental faculties.
I'm charged up about this interview. I like this story. Because first of all, she sounds like she's a legend. Number one. Number two, I would say, so if they're requiring her to take these mental fitness type of tests, cognitive tests, But yet you have the Democrats calling foul on, like, okay, Joe Biden, he can't take these cognitive tests. We don't need to for the presidency. Yeah. Why the double standard?
Well, that's a great question, and there is a federal statute, a judicial conduct and disability statute of 1980, but which they claim that they're enforcing, except they're not, because, for example, one of the requirements of that statute is that the judge has to stay on the bench throughout the duration of the investigation and the appeals. But they removed her from the bench, and she hasn't heard any cases since March. So that's already a violation that Chief Judge Moore of the Federal Circuit is responsible for, and her colleagues on the Federal Circuit are responsible for. They've also not followed all of the due process requirements that statute has. They've just been really eager to get Judge Newman off the bench and not so eager to follow the law.
Now, a judge on the Court of Appeals, they've got clerks, they've got interactions with other judges, they write opinions and decisions. Has there ever, in the last several years, or ever for that matter, been any indication and any reports of anyone working with her that she's lost a step, that there's mistakes, that it's a problem at all? Has anyone raised any red flag about anything from her?
So there have been concerns that we think are being really misconstrued, because once they started the investigation, and again, they removed her from the bench before they started the investigation, they went through a series of interviews with staff at the Federal Circuit. Now, one of the things that's really unprecedented about this and unusual is that they chose to do the investigation themselves. Whenever there's been an investigation like this of a Federal Circuit judge before, and you can think of Brett Kavanaugh when he was at the D.C. Circuit going up to the Supreme Court and there were charges against him, those were investigated. Even after he got to the Supreme Court, those charges were investigated, but not by his former D.C. Circuit colleagues. It was done by the 10th Circuit. But here, rather than transfer it to another circuit, which has always been done, the Federal Circuit said, no, we're going to keep this one to ourselves. So that was already suspicious. And then they were able to find some of the employees who had some concerns. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Well, I was just going to say some employees had some concerns, and some of the evidence that they used against her, they said, well, she failed this IT test. Well,
come on.
Oh, my Lord. Goodness.
Oh, I would love to see Joe Biden take that same test.
Yeah, let's try that.
Mercy, you know what's at play here. What's at play here is she's a Reagan nominee, and if they can push her out right now, Biden gets to replace her.
That's right.
And that's what's going on.
Well, it's what they're doing with this is one of the reasons why they want to take out even like the Supreme Court justices like Clarence Thomas. But is it legal to force this sort of neurological testing by, on her, basically, that she has to do this? So the special committee, they ordered Judge Newman to submit to this forced neurological testing by a medical
Doesn't the Supreme Court have jurisdiction over this kind of thing?
This is crazy.
So ultimately, the Supreme Court will have jurisdiction, but there is a process here. We argue that they do not have the ability to force this neurological exam. Under the statute, they would have some ability to do it, but as I say, there are these due process protections. For example, it's supposed to be a cooperative selection of the doctor. Well, they weren't having that. They had a particular doctor that they wanted her to use. Again, a little bit suspicious, and they were insisting on that rather than have a cooperative process with her. Now, it's unprecedented in the history of the federal judiciary to order a forced medical exam like this. There have been other times when judges have agreed to do it, where there's been a more cooperative process, but there's never been anyone who has been ordered to do it and has gone through with it, and that would be a terrible precedent to set, which is part of why Judge Newman is fighting the way that she is, insisting on her due process rights. She's going to go down swinging.
This is a great story.
And obvious. She is a former boxer, by the way.
Is that right? Oh, I love that. Judge
killer.
Pauline Newman, who is still. By the way, WMAL was 2 years old when she was born. I just want everyone to know.
You loved Lala Kent on Vanderpump Rules. Now get to know her on Give Them Lala.
The Gen Zers, they love to be Gen Z-y, are calling Margot Robbie mid on On what planet is Margot Robbie a mid? Who's judging this? Like, are women judging it? The people, the forward haircuts.
Yeah.
Don't bring my people into this. The people with the foreheads, babe.
We all agree that she's a 10.
Yes.
Give them Lala wherever you listen.